My stepdad sold my cabin to pay his gambling debts, but when I discovered he forged my signature, I sued him and got everything back legally while he faced criminal charges he never saw coming. I'm 29 years old. I work as a volunteer in medical clinics in rural areas, and like 6 months ago, I got a call that basically made me feel like someone had ripped my heart out of my chest. I was in this tiny village lost in the mountains of Guatemala, seeing patients in a makeshift clinic, when my phone started ringing. It was Gregory, my stepfather, and just from the tone of his voice, I knew something was wrong. But I never imagined what he was about to tell me. Let me back up a bit so you understand why this affected me so much. When I was like 23, my best friend Samantha and I bought a mountain cabin together. It was our special place, you know? The kind of spot we'd go to when we needed to escape from the world, drink wine, walk through the forest, just exist without the stress of normal life. We'd been saving for years to be able to buy it, and when we finally got it, it was like a dream come true. The cabin wasn't anything fancy, like a wooden structure with 2 bedrooms, a fireplace that barely worked, and an absolutely incredible view of the valley, but it was ours. Completely ours. Well, half mine and half Samantha's, to be exact. Gregory came into my life when I was like 16. My mom met him at a church event or something. I don't remember exactly. And they got married super fast, like within a year of meeting. At first, he seemed like a decent guy. He worked in used car sales, always had funny stories to tell, and my mom seemed happy with him. But over time, I started noticing weird things. He'd disappear on weekends without clear explanation. He was always borrowing money, and there were times when my mom would cry in her room when she thought no one could hear her. I never had a close relationship with him, to be honest. I was cordial, I guess. But I always kept my distance because something inside me said I shouldn't trust him completely. When I bought the cabin with Samantha, I told my parents. Obviously. My mom was excited for me. Came to visit us a couple times and loved the place. Gregory came once too, walked around, said it was nice, and I didn't think much of it. Why would I? He was just my stepfather visiting my property. It never crossed my mind that years later he would try to steal that place from me. So anyway, I'm in Guatemala, right? I'd been working at this clinic for like 3 months, taking care of people who didn't have access to basic medical services, and honestly, I was in one of the most fulfilling moments of my life. I was tired, sure, sleeping on a thin mattress on the floor of a borrowed house, eating rice and beans practically every day, but I felt useful, you know what I mean? Then the phone rings and it's Gregory. "Allison," he says, with that voice that was trying to sound casual but was clearly nervous. "I have to tell you something." And I'm standing there under the scorching sun, with the sound of chickens in the background, thinking maybe something had happened to my mom. "What happened?" I asked him. And he dropped the bomb, just like that, without preparation. "I sold the cabin." I literally froze. "What?" I said, because honestly, I didn't process what I'd just heard. "I sold the cabin," he repeated, like he was talking about the weather. "I needed the money, Allison, and the cabin was just sitting there unused. It's all closed now. The buyer paid and everything. I thought it was for the best." I don't think I breathed for like 10 full seconds. When I could finally speak, the only thing that came out of my mouth was, "You sold what?" "Gregory, that cabin isn't yours. It's not even in your name. What are you talking about?" And he, with the biggest audacity in the world, told me that since I was out of the country and wasn't using it, he thought he could sell it to solve some financial problems he had. Financial problems. Those were his exact words. I started yelling at him on the phone, which I normally don't do, because I'm not someone who loses control like that. But in that moment, I literally saw red. People at the clinic were looking at me worried, and I'm there screaming in English about how could he think of doing that it was illegal. That property was mine and Samantha's, not his. And he just kept saying it was already done. There was no going back. That the money had already been used, and I should understand, because he was in a desperate situation. When I hung up the phone, I sat on the ground and started crying. I couldn't believe it. I simply couldn't process that someone, especially someone from my family, could do something like that. That cabin represented years of work, of saving, of sacrifice. Samantha and I had put all our energy into that place. It was our refuge, our safe space, and this guy had just sold it like it was old furniture at a garage sale. The first thing I did was call Samantha. It was like 2 in the morning her time, but I didn't care. I called like 15 times until she answered. When I told her what happened, she was silent for a moment and then said, "Wait, your stepfather did what?" And me explaining the whole situation again while crying, and her trying to calm me down, telling me that couldn't be legal, that Gregory had no rights over the property, that we were going to fix this. Samantha is a lawyer, or well, she works at a law firm, although she's not technically a lawyer yet, and she knows about these things. She told me to immediately check all the property documents, to look for the co-ownership agreement we'd signed when we bought the cabin, where it clearly established that we were both 50% owners, and that any sale or transaction required both our signatures. I sent her photos of all the documents I had saved digitally, and she reviewed them that same night. The next day she called me and said, "Allison, this is fraud. What Gregory did is completely illegal. He can't sell a property that isn't his, and any sale made without your signature and mine is void. We're going to get that cabin back, I promise you." And I held onto those words like they were a lifeline because honestly, in that moment, I felt like I was drowning. The next few days were a nightmare. I tried to focus on my work at the clinic, but my mind was constantly on the cabin, on Gregory, on how someone could be so selfish and manipulative. I called my mom, obviously, and she at first tried to defend him, saying Gregory was going through difficult times, that he'd lost a lot of money on I don't know what thing, and that he was desperate. I told her, "Mom, I don't care how desperate he is. What he did is theft. It's literally a crime." And she went quiet, because deep down, she knew I was right. Turns out, and my mom told me this later in a long and painful conversation, Gregory had a serious gambling problem. It wasn't something new. Apparently, he'd been gambling for years on online casinos, horse racing, sports, basically anything he could put money on. He'd accumulated huge debts, like tens of thousands of dollars, and had been hiding it from my mom for a long time. When the creditors started pressuring him and threatening him, he panicked and thought selling my cabin would be the easy solution to his problems. The easy solution to his problems, using my property. Can you believe it? It still makes my blood boil when I think about it. I finished my volunteer work in Guatemala a month after getting that call. It was the longest 4 weeks of my life because all I wanted was to go back home and fix this mess. Samantha had been pulling strings in the meantime, contacting lawyers, reviewing documents, preparing everything for when I got back. The day I arrived at the airport, she was waiting for me with a coffee and a hug, and she told me, "We're going to destroy this guy. But in the legal way." The first thing we did was go directly to the cabin. I wanted to see it with my own eyes, confirm it was still there and that no one had moved in. When we arrived, everything looked the same as always, except there was a sold sign outside that made me want to throw up. Samantha took photos of everything, of the sign, of the property, of anything that could serve as evidence. Then we went to confront Gregory. We drove like 2 hours to my parents' house, and when we got there, my mom opened the door with red eyes. She'd obviously been crying. Gregory was in the living room watching TV like nothing was wrong. When he saw me come in with Samantha, he turned pale, and I, without giving him time to speak, told him, "We need to talk now." He tried to justify himself again, saying he had no other choice, that the guys he owed money to were going to hurt him, that he thought, since I was out of the country for months, I wouldn't care about the cabin. And I told him, "I care, Gregory. I care a lot. And what you did isn't just morally disgusting, it's illegal. You signed documents pretending to be the sole owner of a property that isn't yours. That's fraud." Samantha pulled out all the papers we'd prepared and put them on the table in front of him. She explained, in that cold and professional tone she uses when she's in lawyer mode, that the sale was invalid because both she and I were co-owners and neither of us had authorized or signed anything, that any document he had signed was fraudulent, and that we were going to take legal action immediately. Gregory got defensive, saying the real estate agent had told him he could sell because he was part of the family and had access to the property. But that was a lie, obviously. No legitimate agent would tell him that. What happened was Gregory probably lied about his relationship with the property, presented false or altered documents, and the agent didn't verify the information properly. Or maybe the agent was part of the problem. I don't know, but definitely something shady had happened. Samantha contacted the real estate agent, who supposedly had handled the sale. At first, the guy played dumb, but when Samantha sent him copies of our ownership documents, and explained the legal situation, the guy changed his tune real fast. Turns out Gregory had presented papers that looked legitimate at first glance, but when reviewed carefully had inconsistencies and were probably forgeries. The agent told us the buyer still hadn't taken possession of the property because they were waiting for some final paperwork. That was a huge relief, because it meant we could stop everything before it was too late. Samantha drafted a cease and desist letter, basically a legal document telling Gregory and all parties involved that the sale was fraudulent and needed to be stopped immediately. We gave Gregory a copy in person. My mom was there when we did it, and for the first time I saw that she wasn't defending him. She just sat on the couch crying while Samantha explained to Gregory that if he didn't cooperate voluntarily, we were going to file criminal charges against him. Gregory tried to play the victim, saying he was just trying to survive, that he didn't want to hurt us, but I didn't believe him anymore. He'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. We went to the police and filed a formal complaint. The detective who took our case was named Taylor, an older guy like in his 50s who'd seen everything in his career. When we told him the story and showed him all the documents, he shook his head and said, "This is pretty clear. Your stepfather committed fraud, and we're going to investigate it fully." The investigation took like 3 weeks. Detective Taylor interviewed Gregory, the real estate agent, the supposed buyer, reviewed all the documents, all the money that had changed hands. Turned out Gregory had forged my signature on several documents. And when I say forged, I don't mean he made a good attempt. I mean he literally wrote my name in a way that didn't even look like my actual signature. It was ridiculous, and the fact that anyone had accepted those documents without verifying showed how careless the whole transaction had been. The buyer, who apparently was a guy who wanted the cabin as a vacation home, got really scared when he found out the sale was fraudulent. He immediately asked for his money back and withdrew completely from the deal. I don't blame him. Imagine finding out you're about to buy stolen property. The real estate agent also distanced himself quickly, saying he'd acted in good faith based on the information Gregory had provided him, but that now he saw he'd been deceived. The hardest part of all this, honestly, was seeing how my relationship with my mom got strained. She knew Gregory had done something terrible, but at the same time he was her husband and she didn't want to see him go to jail. She begged me not to press charges, to find another way to resolve it, to think about the family. And I had to tell her something that broke my heart. "Mom, Gregory didn't think about the family when he decided to rob me. He didn't think about me. He didn't think about you. He only thought about himself and his gambling problems. I love him because you love him, but I can't let this go without consequences." Finally, after weeks of paperwork and statements and meetings with lawyers, formal charges were filed against Gregory for fraudulent misrepresentation and attempted theft. The prosecutor's office took the case because there was clear evidence and multiple forged documents. Gregory tried to reach a settlement, offering to return the money he'd received from the sale, but the problem was he'd already spent almost all of it paying off his gambling debts. The transaction was officially voided. That meant legally the sale had never happened, and the cabin was still property of mine and Samantha's. It was a huge relief when we got the written confirmation. I could finally breathe again after months of constant stress. Gregory accepted a plea deal with the prosecutor's office, where he pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for probation, community service, and the obligation to pay restitution even if only partially. He didn't go to jail, which honestly gives me mixed feelings. On one hand, I understand he's my mom's husband, and she would suffer a lot if he were in prison. On the other hand, part of me feels like he got off too easy considering what he did. My mom and I had long and difficult conversations after all this. I told her I loved her but needed her to understand that what Gregory did was unforgivable to me, and that although I wasn't going to stop her from staying with him, I could never have a relationship with Gregory again. She cried a lot, but eventually accepted it. She told me she understood my position and didn't blame me for feeling that way. It's been like 6 months since all this started. Samantha and I went to the cabin last month and spent a whole weekend there, cleaning, fixing some things that had deteriorated from neglect, and just reclaiming our space. We painted the walls a new color, bought more comfortable furniture, and even installed a new fireplace that actually works. It was like a kind of healing ritual, you know what I mean? Erasing the negative energy Gregory had left there and filling it with something positive again. I still get angry when I think about everything that happened. The betrayal, the selfishness, the audacity of thinking he could get away with it. But I also feel proud of myself for fighting, for not staying silent, for using the legal system to protect something that was mine. Many people told me to let it go, that it was just a property, that it wasn't worth ruining family relationships over it. But it wasn't just a property. It was my work, my effort, my future, and no one had the right to take it from me. My mom comes to visit me from time to time, without Gregory, obviously. Our relationship is healing slowly. Although it's not what it was before, there's a crack there that will probably never completely fix, and that makes me sad, but it's reality. She's still with Gregory, trying to help him with his gambling problems, taking him to therapy and support groups. I hope it works, honestly, but it's no longer my responsibility to worry about that. Last week, Samantha and I were at the cabin, sitting on the porch watching the sunset with glasses of wine in our hands, and she told me, "You know what, Allison? I'm glad we fought for this. This place is special." And I told her, "Yes, it is. And now it's completely ours again, without shadows of the past, without lies, just ours." We toasted to that, to friendship, to justice, to new beginnings. And in that moment, watching the sun hide behind the mountains, I felt peace. A peace I hadn't felt in months. Gregory didn't manage to take that away from me, and no one else will either.